One of the best ways to instantly improve your riding is to get your fueling spot on. Many of us know the basics, but how do you build on that and get things absolutely perfect so you can ride faster than ever and also enjoy your riding more towards the end of a ride? Well, in this video, I'm going to share some tips to do just that and also look in some expert help. So I'm about to head out on my own long ride as I discuss some of these tips, and I think my main port of call is to obviously make sure my bottles are full and my pockets are full with food. I think what you really need to think about is how much you need per hour to sustain yourself for the ride you're about to be doing. And really need to think about that in terms of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, they're easy to digest, they're the main fuel source for your body at the higher intensity levels needed for cycling, and they're also pretty compact and easy to carry. Now you want to look for about 60 to 120 grams of carbs per hour or more in some cases if you're heading out for a long ride. Carbs are also ideal because they provide really fast energy to the muscles, so perfect for keeping things topped up as you're riding. Now we here at GCN are really lucky to be supported by Precision Fuel and Hydration for all our rides and big challenges, and I think the advantage to using a kind of sports nutrition product is that it comes in a really compact package. You know the carbs you're getting in, and you can kind of really divide them up for your ride, and you can easily transport them too. But I also like to supplement that with real food as well, so bananas, rice cakes, brioche with jam on, flapjacks are great as well. The main thing though is that you want to make sure your hourly total is spot on. You're getting enough carbs in to sustain your riding. But how do you know exactly what is right for you? After all, we're all different, and there is a big difference between 60 and 120 grams of carbs per hour. That's almost like double the gels. So recently I caught up with Precision Fuel and Hydration's founder, Andy Blow, to get his take.
The fundamentals of fueling are getting enough energy in to fuel the work that you're going to do. And if you're working pretty hard on a bike, most of the time that means taking in enough carbohydrates. You need different amounts of carbohydrate depending on what you're doing. So generally speaking, intensity and duration of exercise are the biggest things that dictate how much carbohydrate you're going to need. When you're going for longer and when you're racing or riding harder, you're going to need more carbohydrate. When you're going for less time or you're taking it easier, your requirements per hour are going to drop. The ballpark amount of carbohydrate that you're going to need per hour is probably going to be somewhere between 30 and 90 grams per hour. That's quite a wide range, and 30 to 60 grams an hour is going to be most appropriate for people who are riding for an hour to 2 to 3 hours. Once you're going longer, and especially if you're racing and going hard, you're going to be pushing towards 60, over that, and towards 90 grams an hour.
So I'm about 40 kilometres into my ride. I'm going for about an hour, 40, 45 minutes. And I'm starting to get through the food. I like to bring a handlebar bag with me. Pockets are full, so it takes a bit of all those items. And it's not overloaded. Now I've already got through 3 of these chews and a banana. So that's around 90, 100 grams of carbs in total. And I'm keeping on top of things, which in the past is something I haven't been the best at. I've often started my rides really full and loaded up, so I haven't quite got the urge to eat. And then I don't eat anything on the bike. 2 hours in, start smashing the carbs, and I feel pretty stuffed. Not really the best strategy. I think Andy explains this best.
Generally speaking, in terms of pacing your carbohydrate intake out over the length of a ride, you would want to aim to do it relatively evenly. Even though you might not feel like you need to eat a lot of carbs in the first hour of a 6-hour ride, if you wait until you're feeling hungry or your energy levels are dropping, you're going to be on the back foot. So actually working out the total amount and portioning it out quite evenly is probably the way to go.
Either way, I'm quite a big guy, so my hourly carb intake is rather high, and also I do tend to ride quite intensely when I am out on the bike because I'm trying to keep up with my fellow GCN presenters. They're always putting me to the sword. That's another reason why I do need to up things so I don't fall off a cliff, metaphorically speaking. But it's not always the case. If you're riding slower, steadier, you don't need to eat quite as much, so you can reduce this hourly carb intake. Either way though, we all start with different levels of glycogen stored in our muscles before each ride?
Glycogen is the storage form of carbohydrate energy in the body. It's found mainly in two places. One is inside your muscles and the other is inside your liver. The glycogen in your liver is what keeps your blood sugar levels up and feeds your brain with glucose, because your brain only runs on glucose, which is why you feel so rubbish when your blood sugar levels drop. The glycogen in your muscles is there to fuel the activity that you're doing, so that's what we rely on when we're exercising hard. And you've usually got somewhere between 60 and 120 minutes worth of glycogen in your muscles if you're well stocked before you start exercising.
Hydration is, of course, a really big factor in getting your fueling right, and we have got a real deep dive on the topic coming out very soon on the channel, so stay tuned for that. But right now, what are the real basics to nail your hydration strategy? Here's Andy with the lowdown.
To get your hydration strategy right, you've got to focus on the amount of water and liquid that you're going to take in total, the amount of electrolyte you're going to take in, and then you're going to have to tune that to how the conditions are on the day. So the hotter it is, the more you're sweating, and the bigger your sweat rate, the more you're going to need to drink as an individual, and then alongside that, the more sodium you're going to need to take in. Conversely, on a cooler day, shorter ride, your hydration requirement could drop substantially. So unlike fueling, which is fairly static, hydration tends to move up and down based a lot on the weather conditions. If you don't take sufficient hydration in alongside your fueling, you'll start to find you become dehydrated, and you'll find it harder to absorb the calories that you're eating, and you'll find it harder to process them and actually get benefit from the fuel you're taking in. So hydration very much goes hand in hand with fueling, and if you get one wrong, you're going to be in trouble.
Trying to eat all this food on the bike can sometimes feel like a physical challenge to keep on top of, especially as your ride progresses. But there are a few simple things you can do to keep on top of it all. One thing that's really helped me in the past is to try and create some sort of alarm or alert at set intervals throughout a ride, so you don't leave things to chance. Well, who actually have this set up on their head units? So you can have a custom alert which tells you every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes or whatever, how you need to eat, and it really reminds you. And that's, for me, really beneficial, because especially on long rides, you get lost in your own thoughts and time passes in strange ways. So anything you can do to remind yourself to stick to your plan at the start is a really good thing. Also, I think if you're someone who's quite nervous about eating whilst they're riding, for whatever reason, it can be quite hard to keep on top of things. This is something that actually applied to me, especially when I was racing in really nervous, stressful races. It's quite hard to take your hands off the bars, get into your pockets and eat. And then for that reason, I'd often kind of put off eating until it was too late. Now, I think in these scenarios, especially in kind of group rides, gels are really handy because they're quite compact, contain a lot of carbs. You can eat them with one hand quite quickly, just tearing off the top with your teeth and getting it in, putting your rubbish back in your pocket. But there's also even bigger gels than this that Precision actually make. You can fill it into your bottles. You can have one bottle full of gels, and even easier to consume. And throughout the ride, you can just sip from that, as well as your normal water as you go. But even with the best intentions and best strategy, sometimes things just don't go to plan. And in those cases, how do you get them back on track? And what happens if you actually do too well and eat too many carbs? Is that a problem?
If you find yourself blowing up on a ride because you just simply haven't eaten enough and you've not consumed enough carbohydrate, the first thing to do is going to be to slow down a little bit and to start getting some more fuel in. Now, you're going to want to take quite a lot in, but you shouldn't overeat, not in a very short space of time, because then you run the risk of the opposite problem, which is feeling sick and bloated. But slowing the pace and starting to make sure that you get back on track with your plan as quickly as you can is the priority. There are many, many different reasons why people suffer from GI distress when they're exercising. One of the most common ones with cyclists is taking in very strong carbohydrate drinks in large quantities when what you actually need is to separate your fueling from your hydration. On a hot day, this can be really bad. If you take in lots and lots of sickly carb drinks and what you need is lots of water and electrolytes, then you might be at first quenching your thirst, but sooner or later you're going to overwhelm your gut and you're going to start to feel quite sick and bloated. So limit the high strength carb drinks, especially on a hot day.
What's the end goal to all this then? What should you expect from getting your fueling strategy absolutely perfect? It's quite a hard thing to quantify, really, especially when you're talking about feeling. But I think what I would say is if you're riding in a group especially and you get your fueling right and those around you don't, towards the end of a really long ride, 100 miler, you're really going to see the difference. Everyone else is going to be really starting to tire, whereas you'll be able to push on and stamp on those pedals, which makes quite a big difference to your performance and also your enjoyment of the ride. It must be said though that in terms of a perfect fueling strategy, I have focused on carbs here as the #1 fuel source, and I think that is true. Personally, I've experimented with other methods and they haven't worked for me, but I can see how they might work for other people, and if that is the case, then go for it. And I wanted to hear Andy's take on the topic, because something like a low-carb, high-fat approach has had some notable successes. So what's his view on the topic?
There are alternative approaches to fueling with carbohydrates, and one of them is called the low-carb, high-fat approach, which basically means that in your diet, and especially around the times that you ride, you rely more on fat by not taking in carbohydrate. Your body has a massive store of fat. Even if you're quite a lean individual, you have enough fat to power hours and hours, days and days of activity, in fact. The problem with the low-carb, high-fat approach is that it might work for very long duration or very low-intensity events, but it doesn't really cater for racing at high intensities, because you need to burn energy at a rate that can't be released from fat. So sometimes when you're doing really long expedition-based stuff, when your only aim is to keep going at a low intensity for a long period of time, low carb can work, but it's very rare we see anyone using a low carb approach when they're racing at a serious level.
I must say big thanks to Andy from Precision Fuel and Hydration for the added insight into this topic, and I really hope you found this video useful. Please give it a big thumbs up if you did. I'm about to crack on with my own long ride now. Keep on eating and drinking, of course, but let me know in the comments down below, what's your preference for fueling? What works best for you? If you've got any questions, let us know. We'll do our best to get back to you. Right, bananas on the ready, let's hit it.